Broke something. Okay, so desk setup changed. It's probably going to keep changing for a hot minute. We've had some changes and stuff happen. I got a rug, and so I ended up moving my little lap desk down to the ground, so I have a desk when I'm on the floor, because I've spent a lot of time working on the floor lately. And so I'm probably going to need to get something to elevate or like give me able to have this at eye level, my computer at eye level, whilst typing at a more comfortable level. We'll figure that out later. I also got a new chair, and like, guys, it has back support. It's great. It's great. Never knew when we'd reach this day, but we are here. Let me start off with the thing I said. I just posted on Instagram. It said we're starting to let people know we're getting. Oh, I posted on Instagram letting people know we are currently live, and let them know why on stream. On stream, we're going to be talking about why really quickly. First and foremost, I plan on making my streams earlier. Xavier's availability changed with his job, and to make sure he can get those nice, like, juicy, long streams throughout the week, I'm going to just go ahead and do my streams earlier for him. Don't mind. No problem there. The other thing, the reason why today I'm doing it even earlier than I said previously on Instagram is because I have a dentist appointment I need to go to. Go see your dentist. Talk to your dentist. It's important. Trust me. So we're going to go to a dentist appointment and then come back home, do more work. But yeah, so today we are talking about The Ables by Jeremy Scott. Another thing that I'm supposed to talk about before we really get into this book is this deep-rooted feeling that I have when I hear like a YouTuber book has become a #1 bestseller. And really, I'm just trying to find Goodreads because I also want to talk about some of the criticism. If I have time, I want to talk about some of the criticism for this book. But really, the issue I have with this is the same issue that YouTubers have when they see a late night show host has gotten a YouTube play button, or when they see that a musician and a music video has hit one of the YouTube video milestones or is one of the most played videos of YouTube. It's really that you have this industry that people within the industry and that originate in the industry have worked really hard to build and to work towards a lot of the goals in that industry. And then you have someone that comes with their own audience to that industry, hits the goals almost immediately because they came with the audience instead of building the audience here. And it kind of just devalues some of those awards. It's also the same reason why you have a lot of people saying Marvel movies shouldn't be considered for a lot of these big awards, because they're coming with their own audience, and that's going to give them a leg up to get a lot of these awards, a lot of the accomplishments that someone working and building their career straight directly from that one field are something that's going to take a lot longer for you if you're building from this one field. It's not to say that a YouTuber cannot write a good book. It's saying that if you have an audience that you know is going to sell out your merch line, then of course you're going to have that same audience buy enough copies to make you a bestseller. Being a bestseller essentially no longer, to me, feels like it is something that has to do with the quality of the book. It feels more to do with the clout of the author, the clout of whoever created the work. And it's kind of just, I don't want to say that I wouldn't want to reach bestseller, because again, I would be building my career from the bottom up as an author. I'm not bringing over an audience. So it would be a big milestone to me, but I don't necessarily look at that as, I don't necessarily look at, like, I can tell the difference between when this person gets the award and when I would be able to get the award. I don't necessarily feel hard. I don't feel hard on myself. I've been able to, like, not feel hard on myself and understand that just because someone got it doesn't mean and I don't have it, doesn't mean that I'm not working hard enough. It means that I do not necessarily have a lot of the things they have going for them. I don't have millions of subscribers on YouTube that will buy my books, stuff like that. It's really more of a, like, I'm more focused, really. I kind of just tune out those kinds of notifications, those kinds of, that kind of news nowadays. Because at this point, I don't care. The awards aren't what's important. If I can reach one person and make their day, make their life a little better, that's more than enough. As much as I would want to reach multiple people and help multiple people's lives, help multiple people's days, if I can reach one in my lifetime, that's fine. Long rant. It wasn't even that long. And again, I don't want you to think anything I just said has anything to do with this book and what I'm going to say about this book. So, first thing off, and maybe this was something I noticed because I was listening to the audiobook, I got heavy Sandlot vibes from it. And I know some people in the reviews were saying, oh, it's so, the narration's clunky. The narration doesn't really sound like a 12-year-old child, because it's not a 12-year-old child. Even throughout the book, not only because, of course, it's not narrated by a child, but throughout the book, they're talking about, oh, I remember this. If only I knew this. This person's reflecting on the story that we're being told. So we are genuinely not looking at a child here. It reminds me of The Sandlot. If you haven't seen The Sandlot, my bro, you really should watch it. Classic movie. But it really gives off the vibe of The Sandlot. I'll admit, this book was funny. This book was really funny. And I actually really, really loved the first half of this book. And I loved the feeling of it. I loved the story and how it was going. Let's go off. Let's describe it. So you have this kid. His name's Philip Salinger. He is blind. His dad takes him out to the field one day, and they're going to have a discussion. And Philip is panicking because he thinks he's about to get the birds and the bees talk. And let me tell you one of the lines that killed me. It's not an exact quote, but he's saying, his dad's just kind of beating around the bush, and Philip's panicking. And he says, of the things about when it comes to sex, I kind of know the general idea. Anything else, I'll fill in through trial and error. And the double entendre, I literally died laughing when I heard that line. It was so funny. But his dad, luckily, was not giving him a sex talk. He was there to tell Philip that superheroes are real. They're called custodians in this world, because in the word custodian, back when custodians were essentially given the name, it means guardian. And so they're superheroes. They live in a town that has probably 1,000 superheroes of the 9,000 population, and it's either superheroes or they are human helpers that assist superheroes and their ability to live a normal life, stay quiet, even stuff like that. Philip and his father are both telekinetics, meaning that they can move things with their mind. But the issue is it's going to be harder for Philip to actually like hone his skills because he can't see. Philip's mother is a teleporter. Philip's little brother, who does not yet know about the whole superhero thing, he is a speedster. He has super speed. And I will say I truly appreciate that this book did not decide to make the blind kid's superpower super hearing. Like, it's actually the way they describe it with telekinesis. You really do need to be able to know what an object's like dimensions, its weight are, to really be able to move it with your mind. And so from the beginning, I was very interested to see the journey that Philip was going to go on as he is trying to figure out a way around the limitation of his blindness. And we actually do see another blind child in the story, and his superpower is teleporting, like Philip's mother. So he goes to school. At this point, everyone in school knows about superpowers, stuff like that. And he's upset because he is put in a class for special needs children, particularly kids with disabilities. And he's a little annoyed, upset about that. He meets some friends. Particularly, you have Henry. He is in a wheelchair, but he is a mental. He can read minds and other things. You have Bentley, who is super smart, but he has, I forgot what it was actually called, but he has mobility issues. Donnie, who has Down syndrome. We don't know his power yet. They said his genetics are so mutated that there's no way to know if he has a power, what power it is, stuff like that. James, who is the other blind child that can teleport. Who else? I think that's all. You also meet these school bullies. Chad, who can turn invisible, and his old friend Steven? I forgot what his friend's name. He's not important, really. The other bully's not important. And essentially, the way we learn about what's going to be the important name, the Ables. The Ables were a group of small custodians that saved the world by using wits and intelligence back in the days of yore. Like, I honestly kind of want to say it's like prehistoric times, something like, but probably not prehistoric, but like early human civilization times. They saved the world from this guy named Elbin. I think it's Elbin or Elvin. We'll go Elbin for here. But save him from Elbin, who was the only superhero they've ever known to have every power ever. And for the most part in this world, you can have a person that has one or two. People can have one power. That's common. People having two powers, they tend to have what they refer to it as like a Jekyll and Hyde personality thing, and they are two variations of the same root power. But you never see people with just two random powers, or like Elman, who has all of the powers. So back to the kids, we are introduced to this thing called a super sim. They just decided that they wanted to start having them at the school again, and it's essentially the whole town is putting together a scene, it's a whole shenanigan where everyone in the town is participating, pretending that all of these fake crimes are happening, and you have the adult custodians pretending to be supervillains, and the kids have to fight them, arrest them, and you get points, and then ideally you want to be the team that has the most points. But we find out that disabled heroes are not allowed to participate because the last super sim that they did like 20 years ago, a blind kid with ability to fly accidentally flew into another flying student and they both died. So the city council decided that it would be a danger to themselves and to everyone else to have disabled heroes participate. So what do? Because they were excited about it. They wanted to do it. So Bentley, Henry, Philip, all of their friends decide to put forth a legal argument against the city council, arguing their case, and they do eventually become able to participate because what they discover is that Henry's mind control abilities, his ability to did I say mind control? It's not mind control. He can read minds. But Henry's ability to read minds goes both ways. So not only can he read minds and see images and see what an image that someone else can see, he can also put thoughts into someone else's mind, as well as put images into someone else's mind. And by using this the ability to put images into Philip's mind, who is blind, he is now able to see, which helps him quite a bit with his telekinesis. So now they're able to participate in the Super Sim. First Super Sim, they do really, really bad. They don't know where any of the crimes are going to be, so they do really bad. But they hear something going on in the library. The library is supposed to be an off-limits zone, so that stresses them out. But they find out that there's a guy named Finch digging around in the library, trying to steal some stuff. And this guy creeps him out to no end. They go to report this to adults. The people in the town don't believe them, but his parents do. I think that's a good place to move on. There's some other little things, like, for instance, people in the world, normal people don't know about superheroes. There's a guy who can essentially erase any instance of seeing a superhero from the minds of everyone in the world. And he does that. There's a point, though, where his power fails. So, his power fails. And the world sees the superhero, and it's still like national news. But they essentially still lie because their youngest son, Patrick, still doesn't know about superheroes. So they decide to lie to him, tell him, nah, it's all TV magic, and move on. Next time these kids see Finch, it's just Henry, Philip, and Donnie. It's just Henry, Philip, and Donnie. It's Halloween. They're looking for everything going on, trick-or-treating hardcore, and they see him and they decide to follow him. Then he teleports and it freaks them out. So they run out to the cornfield, the same cornfield that Philip's father took him to give them superhero talk. They've been using that field to practice all their superpowers at. They run out there. Finch chases them down, and he is using all of these crazy powers. And it freaks him out because, again, no one's supposed to be able to use powers, but he says he's an absorber. And an absorber is a person that can, if there's a superhero nearby, they can use their power. So that's what he says. So he's freaking them out. What Philip ends up doing is he pushes a button that's supposed to emergency call his mother. His mother teleports directly to him, tries to teleport them out, but Finch has put a no power zone on her, which is the same thing they use on the schools and a lot of other zone areas. You put a no power zone is a superhero's ability to prevent a person from being able to use their powers. He puts a no power zone on her, then snaps, and she's in a superpower induced coma. And what we find out is that Finch actually just believes that Philip is going to be the reincarnation of Elvin. It's such a long story. And that's why he's doing all of this. He wants him to experience great pain through the loss of his mother, but he keeps her in a coma for a while. Over this time, they're practicing for more Super Sims, and we see Chad the bully comes back to school. But this time he had been sent away for punching Philip in the stomach. He got sent to a military school. Comes back because after an accident there was an accident and a car fell on his arm and it had to be amputated. And now he's a disabled kid. He's getting bullied and stuff, and so he wants a second chance. So Chad joins the group, and they are on the second Super Sim, trying to figure out how they want to go about figuring this whole game out, trying to win, at least get some points so they don't feel so ashamed this time around. What they end up doing is Bentley, the super smart kid, puts up thousands of cameras around the school. Not even around the school, around the whole city. He puts thousands of cameras up, and they use the cameras to track down a crime. Philip, Henry, and Chad go to solve this crime as a fireball guy. Throw in fireballs, he has a hostage. They send Chad to sneak up behind him, but he's just, when Philip makes the distraction that's supposed to help Chad use his invincibility to tackle the guy, Chad doesn't respond. So they call Donnie in, and Donnie at this point has shown the ability to use super speed. He runs out, trips over what they believe to be an unconscious Chad, and he at super speed hits two people, and lots of people end up going to the hospital. So they decide that, we're going to get back to this, but they decide that they want to disband the Ables, which is what the kids named their superhero team for the Super Sim. They disband the Ables, no longer allowed to participate in Super Sims. In this time, we have him meet Finch one more time. Finch then decides to kill Philip's mother, and that sends Philip into a roll downward spiral. And decides to kill Philip's mother, and that sends Philip into a roll downward spiral. To the point where what he ends up doing to get back with his friends, they hang out, and they decide that they want to actually, instead of participating in the fake Super Sim and solve fake crimes, they decide they want to go out to New York City and solve real crimes there. So they're doing that, and that's what they do for a couple months. The last Super Sim comes, and they decide they just want to hang out in their house for that day. And things start to sound like the world is genuinely ending outside, and it is, because Finch has brought all of his minions, and they are murdering people throughout the town, kidnapping the rest. Philip and his squad go to try and solve the issue. He meets Finch face to face. Turns out Chad has been a double agent this whole time, but Philip and them, they already knew that. So again, it's the whole Finch is essentially brought into life this prophecy that was mentioned earlier, trying to make Philip not only an outcast, a kid that has experienced great loss, and the sole hero of the town, standing face to face with the villain. And that's supposed to bring out all of the powers. He's supposed to finally become the reincarnate of Elvin. But it doesn't work. They try their hardest to stop him, and that means bringing in Luther Charles, who is himself an outcast, because back in the day he was partnered with Philip's grandfather, Thomas Salinger, who was an absorber that all the that was able to take and use the powers of the people around him. He turned on his friend got shot in the face with like a lightning bolt. He immediately regretted it, used his power to kill the villain that killed his friend. And went out in hiding for the rest of his days. But Philip came to him and was like, you're the only chance we have at solving all of this. So they bring him in, and it turns out that Finch has been, this whole time, was Philip's grandfather, who actually didn't die. Philip uses Luther's powers the no power zone, so he puts the no power zone on Finch. Philip almost kills him, but then Henry convinces him not to, and Finch then gets healed by one of his little goons and sets off a nuclear bomb in the town. Right as the nuclear bomb is about to kill everyone, time slows down, and you see this blue light running around, picking people up and dropping them off at the cornfield. And it turns out to be Donnie. Donnie then runs back and creates a black hole to envelop the nuclear bomb, and then he vanishes. And then the townspeople go to try and restore their city. Finch got away, but the townspeople go to try and restore their city. So let's talk about, like I said earlier, I loved this book until about the halfway point, until we got to this second Super Sim, where, as far as the town people know, this child had randomly just fallen unconscious and stayed invisible. Chad had randomly fallen unconscious and stayed invisible the entire time he was unconscious. And that tripped Donnie, who was running at super speed, because he couldn't see him because Chad was invisible. And what ended up happening was, not only did they just say, oh, disabled kids, they're a danger, which in reality, why didn't a single adult try and figure out why this child had randomly turned up unconscious? That would have been the move. Number 2, you also see them going full on, like, pitchforks at Donnie, trying to ban him, have Down syndrome kids banned from the school, when if this is literally anyone's fault, it is not Donnie's. Because again, there was an invisible person that just tripped him. Not only that, but if you want these kids to be able to control their powers, no one is teaching them. No one is, like, mentoring them on how to use their powers. They are going to a cornfield on their own, trying to figure this stuff out. No one is helping them with this. It's like all of those people are, that is by far the most ignorant thing I've ever heard, and it's truly a point where my suspension of disbelief, I truly cannot buy into the idea that this situation happened and not one adult is trying to figure out why this kid is randomly unconscious in the street. It turns out he distinctly, Chad was invisible, got on his hands and knees and tried to trip Donnie and succeeded. So it was a malicious attack, but why did no adult want to try and figure out what happened in that regard is beyond, I could not buy into that for me. As well as, again, this random kid is unconscious and invisible in the street. How is someone supposed to see that and not actually be able to avoid that when he's invisible? So those were some issues for me that really, like, messed with my suspension of disbelief, and the rest of the book hinges on their ability to not be in the Super Sim. Yeah, and because I couldn't buy into this, I really couldn't. It made it hard for me to process and go forth with that. Next was this whole thing with Finch killing Philip's mother. I can't believe that this child is actually able to blame himself so much when Finch has said, like, your mother has to die for you to unlock these powers. Finch genuinely said, your mother has to die for you to unlock these powers. If you join me without fighting it, I can keep her in a coma for a little bit longer, but she's gonna die. And then Philip decides to call for help, So Finch kills his mother right away. I don't believe that this child actually thinks that it was his fault that she had died. I can't believe that. The other big issue that I had with this book is I feel like there were so many big revelations at the end of the book that just weren't earned. And it honestly just seems like the author just had these ideas in his head, and in his head it was a more fleshed out story, but on paper there were just so many missing pieces for the reader. For instance, the whole Finch's Thomas Salinger thing. And honestly, a lot of these you can see coming. Like, you can see it coming, it's just the story didn't set it up. But the Finch's Thomas Salinger thing, they say multiple times no one has ever survived a direct hit from this, like, his name is Artemis, the guy who quote-unquote kills him. He shots a lightning bolt and apparently shot him directly in the face. No one has ever survived a shot from this guy, but Thomas Salinger survived a shot to the face. How? No one cares. Also, the other question, did literally nobody look for a body, at least for the sake of having a burial for this man? It makes, because he says, you should have checked to see if I was alive. Did no one check to see if his body was still even there? Which, that really doesn't make sense. You also have Luther recognizing him. There's a scene where you do see this, there's a photo that Finch essentially gives to the kids, and they take it to Luther, at least tell us, and ask him, at least tell us who in this photo could be Finch. And he tears the photo and immediately was like, hey, I figured it out. But I guess because Finch has a big scar on his face from getting hit by Artemis, I guess he was comparing the not scarred part of the face to the other half of the face on the photo. That's an assumption I'm making. They don't really explain that in the book. The whole Donnie is Elben thing. I just truly wish there had been any time devoted to really fleshing out this, because once we get to a point of this is not Philip, you're essentially left with, oh, it could be literally anybody else, and it feels more like they just kind of threw in someone else. I kind of wish they had gone over this whole prophecy thing and attached it to Donnie, as opposed to just being like, it could be anyone else. And here's Donnie. Because I feel like I would have appreciated the book taking some time. I feel like I would have appreciated the book taking some time to really put him into that place, but that is not what we ended up getting. We just kind of, you just see it be everyone kind of in shock about it. The whole Chad is a bad guy thing. My issue with this is it's kind of described as if he is an actual goon of Finch. He is a believer. He believes in the reincarnation of Elben. But when Finch is outing him to the group, he has body language that makes him seem guilt-ridden. So if he is a believer, then why is he so guilty about deceiving these kids? I don't know. That didn't really sit right either. Next, you have when Mr. Charles comes in, Luther Charles comes in, puts the no power zone on Finch. He also puts the no power zone on Finch's goons, one of whom is keeping like 400 people invisible. Theoretically, those people are what give Finch his seemingly infinite number of powers. But it feels like they are mixing up a lot of the kids' conclusions and guesses that they made about who Finch is, because I would have preferred it because Finch had been saying that he is just an absorber that is very skilled and is able to maintain the powers of someone for much longer than for several hours, as opposed to just the people who are nearby him. And I would have preferred that be the reality of the situation, as opposed to him being an absorber that just happens to have 400 people around him, because the other idea had been Finch has one power and there are just a bunch of people around him that are doing the other crazy skills. And so those seemed mixed up. And it would have been nice to see, like, maybe he's more skilled, because the coma that Finch is keeping Phil's mother in is to keep her in the coma without killing her is something that takes a little more skill than these people have seen before. So it would have made sense to just see someone more skilled in the power of absorbing than to have the reveal of there's actually just 400 people behind him at all times. And really the last thing that really confused me on some of the main climax was, at some point, Chad shoots Mr. Charles, and that causes his no power zone to drop. I don't know if he dies or not. They really drop the topic. You see the kids go back to his cornfields and practice some more, but we don't know if they don't address whether or not he has died. So yeah, that was just kind of thrown up. I also feel like the town, you had this guy genuinely take an army and slaughter a lot of people in your town and hold captive the rest. I don't believe that after even several months without this guy being behind bars, anyone is trying to get back to normal life. And that's really what the book seems like. Just everyone's trying to move on. I don't know if we could do that that quickly. So what do I feel about this book? It's hard, because I really do think the writing was done well, and I loved the first half of the book, but it was just the conclusion, and leading it up to that, I couldn't buy into a major aspect leading into the conclusion of the story. And not only that, but the conclusion of the story just felt so unearned. What were some of the... I do know we wanted to try and look at some of the ratings, but I'm already over time. It was a good book. I don't know if I would read it again. I feel like I'd have no problem reading again if it came to me, but I for sure wouldn't look out for it. I also don't know. I eventually probably would want to read the second book, but not anytime soon, because it was just really, the ending did end up being pretty disappointing, but I have no doubt that he could get more skilled with his ability to draw in and tie in a conclusion. I just think it was very rough with this first book. And so I'm probably going to take my time to get to the second one. But I do think the writing was done really well. I do really love the first half of this book. It's just until that second super sim that the book really loses me. And so I wonder if maybe there's some things that, with the comments and notes that came from people about this first book, if that's something that improved with the second one. We will wait quite a bit before we see, but we will probably end up talking about it on stream, probably streaming it sometime next year, maybe. Who knows? But with that, I must depart. Thank you all for being here, and until next time, valedictions, friends.